Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is between a rock and a hard place. Sometimes we are faced with a no-win kind of situation and need to make our best possible choice, and it's not easy. So, that's the topic for today's conversation, and it should be interesting. So before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the temperature, the motion, all those sensations, including the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all of those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning. And welcome to you and everybody else who's joining us. And today we're talking about between a rock and a hard place. So sometimes we need to make choices that are kind of the lesser of two evils, or um, the less worse choice, and that's a hard place to be. And the question is, how do we navigate that when we are faced with a choice to make, and both options are not our desire? Both options are painful. How do we choose? And what's the right thing? Like, is there a right thing? Is there a right choice? And when we're in the place of making those difficult decisions, it may be that we complicate the issue by trying to believe that there's a right choice. Sometimes it's not that clear. Sometimes it's not right or wrong. Sometimes it's just difficult. And so when a choice that we make causes pain to self or others or both, how do we navigate that choice? How do we prioritize something that is a conflict, for example, of our personal values versus like enabling somebody else or somebody else's pain or discomfort? So this comes about with as a result of a situation with a client where I really felt very clearly that I wasn't benefiting them, that therapeutically I wasn't benefiting this person. And I felt that it was inappropriate for me to continue to receive payment for not being able for not being able to help them. They, on the other hand, felt that I was helping them. And it was clear to me that that our work wasn't progressing. And it was a tremendously deep frustration for me, caring as much as I do for this person. And so it's it's a challenging place to be, because I have a commitment to this person, even as a friend. I mean, especially as a friend, as someone that I care about quite a lot. And I was able to, I told them that I'm there for them as a friend, but that I couldn't, in good conscience, continue taking money for services that were not effective. And it's interesting, in a situation, I'm speaking of the situation specifically because I imagine that you have had experiences in your life where you've confronted similar dilemmas. And the question, that I came away with, because I've been contemplating this for a long time, to look at, well, am I making a difference? And they had assured me that I was in the past, and I let it go on, and it just came to the place where it just felt so internally out of integrity for me to continue that aspect of our relationship at this time. And knowing that they would misinterpret it as a failure on their part rather than mine. And I think one of the reasons that I'm sharing the occasion here is that I want to be able to address, for you to also recognize situations where you have a deep internal conflict about how best to proceed in a particular circumstance, or perhaps a relationship, or any kind of choice that is kind of between a rock and a hard place. Like, there are negative consequences on either side. And I think ultimately, in looking for guidance on how to be able to navigate such a situation, that we need to be in alignment with our own integrity. That is our North Star. And it's not necessarily a North Star that makes the choice an easy one, because there are multiple values. I think that that's what makes a choice a difficult choice, is when a number of our values are at play, and there may be a conflict. Like, one course serves certain values and the other course serves other values, and how do you weigh which is higher priority. And even when we choose our higher priority value, there's still the pull of the other value that is being challenged, or values that are being challenged. And it's very interesting. It's a very interesting mirror for us to hold up to ourselves, to look at, well, what is motivating that choice? Like, why this choice instead of that choice? And it's interesting too, because I'm what's coming up is the pleasure pain factors, um, values of service. When does service become sort of a codependency, or a an ego-driven kind of thing? um, and also, when does service become sacrifice? And is that something that is meritorious? I tend to believe that sacrifice is not meritorious, that it's not a point of pride. It should not be a point of pride. Um, it's so, I have to say, I'm so in the midst of this. It's made me question a lot of my, well, it's made me question my capability. It's made me question, or I'm using it. Let's not say it's made me. I want to take active part in this, or active responsibility for it. But as a result of this, I have questioned my what my motivations are. I've questioned um, the my capability. I've questioned my commitment to friendship, to integrity. Um, it's been interesting, and I don't think that that's a bad thing, to be able to have those questions and to look at them squarely, to be able to have a balanced view. Or, and what I mean by balanced, I guess a broader perspective, to be able to look at um, how much of this kind of challenge is a challenge to ego, how much of our engagement is ego based, how much of the reasoning is rationalization and self-justification. And I think it's good to be able to look at that, how to be able to look at, where am I in this situation where I'm trying to find some kind of equitable balance, some kind of best course of action, do the right thing, like there's a right thing. And what shows up in this situation is that there's not a right thing. And ultimately, the way that I chose to navigate it was to honor my internal, that like this very, very strong internal impulse to say, this isn't good. We can't continue this way, because it's not good for you. It's not good for me. And not it, we just need to shift the dynamic here. And so I wonder, I'm really curious how you have navigated situations like that. Is it like, do we have to get to a place where the pain is so acute that we just can't ignore it, that we can't walk around it, we can't dance around it, we have to actually take action, even though the action may be undesirable, even though like the whole situation is undesirable. So we can look at this, people staying in relationships that are toxic. And I'm not saying this was toxic, but it actually is related, this notion of staying in a toxic relationship. What is it that will ultimately allow us to extricate ourselves from a relationship that we know is toxic, especially if this relationship that is toxic also gives us lots of goodness? So there's lots of goodness and there's lots of not goodness, or lots and lots of pain. And how do we extricate ourselves from that kind of relationship, or a cycle of toxicity? When you crave the goodness and you get devastated by the badness. And I have seen people in that kind of cycle. I think I've been in that kind of cycle. And at some point, I guess what happens is that the pain outweighs the pleasure to a great enough extreme that we are able to make a choice for another option. I liken this, maybe this is similar in some way to addiction, where it has to get so bad that there's a willingness to make an extremely difficult choice. And I guess the question is, how do we justify these difficult choices? Do we say it's for their good, like the other person, for our good, for a combined good, for, like, how are we to navigate those situations? I mean, the thing that we talk about here a lot is being in alignment, finding your deepest balance, finding your own deep integrity and honoring that. And the thing is that it can be so tempting sometimes to push the boundaries of that integrity in order to help someone else. And I'm putting help in big quotes, in order to try to in the considering of someone else's need over your own. And I don't believe in sacrificial service, actually. Because there's a power dynamic there that is, I think, out of balance. So Rosalind says, air is free, yet is the problem when someone is charging a fee to sell a different quality of air. I don't know how to interpret that, Rosalind. Charging a fee to sell a different quality of air. I don't know. Maybe you could be more specific, because I don't know how to interpret that. And I'm really curious. You mentioned values. Yeah. I still don't see how it relates. Help me, help me. I think we need to remain in alignment with our values. And when we, I think what I'm talking about here is that there's a conflict of values, like a value in this situation, a value of wanting to be able to have this other person experience being loved and nurtured, and also to recognize that the way that a friendship is appropriate for that that relationship, whereas a therapeutic relationship needs to be making change. That it, like, at least in my practice is about creating transformation. It's not just about providing moral support. I can provide moral support as a friend. And so maybe there's some kind of ego thing about what my practice is. I'm not certain. But being tuned in to our own values and also our own integrity, that's the challenge. That's the challenge, is to be able to find that place of integrity, even when the situation is very nuanced, and to recognize that we make the best choices that we can make in a moment, or over time, from a given place. We do the best that we can in that given moment, and sometimes the best that we can isn't that great, and we get to live with that. And it's sobering. It's sobering and it's humbling to be confronted with, I guess, to be confronted with choosing one's own values over the values that are expressed explicitly by someone else when they don't align. Like holding true to our own compass, even in the face of disapproval or negative emotional impact on somebody else, even though we want not to be hurtful to others, knowing that being true to yourself is going to be hurtful to somebody else. What do we choose in that scenario? Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to look at and to try to decipher how to honor ourselves and others in these situations where we're faced with difficult choices. And ultimately, if we connect with that deepest integrity, that deepest sense of, I think our body knows. I think if we just feel into the visceral response, the experience, the experiential intelligence, that can help to guide us in these moments. You know, we're faced with decisions, and there is a knowing of what the right decision is. And I don't mean right in a universal way, but right in terms of a personal alignment, personal integrity kind of decision. I think that we actually do know that, like in our gut, we know that, for example. And yet we don't want to have the consequences of that choice, you know, whether it be negative consequences for ourselves or negative consequences that are experienced by others. And so we fight that choice. It's kind of the same thing in a toxic relationship, right? Where we know what the right choice is, and again, right in quotes, because it's a mitigated, it's not a black and white kind of term in this instance for sure. Um, we know what the healthier choice might be, but we find all kinds of reasons to not make that choice because there are other compelling reasons to not make that choice, even though ultimately that's the choice that needs to be made. So there's avoidance and denial and um, conflict, resistance, all kinds of emotions around making that choice. And so I think it's important to bring curiosity. Uh, I'm not big on regret. I think that there can be sadness and there can be grieving. I think that that's maybe a really important, not maybe, that is a really important component to recognizing the pain of making these uncomfortable choices. And then there needs to be some acceptance and compassion for making the best possible choice one can in a difficult situation. So I'd be really curious to hear from you about your experiences in this arena of making difficult choices. So Rosalind says choices can be guided by choosing the environment that would be better suited to express self. For sure. There are all kinds of, I think that that's probably a really, really valid metric for making a choice, guiding a choice. Ultimately finding that alignment, which is perhaps our self-expression. But when it's self-pitted against other in a way, and the intention is to create wholeness, how do we navigate that? It's not an, I don't think it's an easy or a black and white kind of situation or answer. Super challenging, super, super challenging. And I really appreciate your engagement in the conversation. It's not an easy conversation to have. And sometimes we muddy our own guidance because we don't like the answer. We talked about that yesterday, listening and then finding answers that we don't like, but being willing to follow those answers, being willing to follow that guidance is probably our greatest our best path of action, even though it's hard sometimes. So Rosalind says it can seem daunting to plant new seeds. Just watering and keeping the soil fertilized can be enough until the season inspires, create something new. You are such a poet, Rosalind, and I really appreciate that. It's interesting because in this situation, I'm thinking that it's more like preparing the soil, pulling up weeds and maybe even uprooting a plant that is a beautiful plant, but doesn't fit in the garden somehow. I don't know. It's allowing things to emerge step by step. I think that's a big part of what you're saying. I'm really appreciative of that. Anyway, that's it for this morning. I so appreciate the opportunity, really, truly, to talk through these things and challenge ourselves to find our way of integrity and wholeness and alignment. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And again, such deep gratitude and appreciation to you for the opportunity to muddle these things through together. So until next